everyone. Welcome to Decked, the YouTube show where we play games for your amusement. I'm Tyler, and with me today is Ray.
How's it going, Tyler?
Good, how are you?
Doing well.
We're going to play Call of Cthulhu, the card game, for your pleasure. What you're seeing right now on the screen is Ray and I playing a game earlier, and we've circled back to it to talk about the game. We just flipped to see who's going to go first. It looks like I'm considering my card, so I'm probably playing first. Just to let you know, this Cthulhu deck is one I found on the internet, made from a... No,
Ooh.
Ray's going first.
Yes, looks like you made me go first.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us about your deck then, since it's your turn?
I am playing an agency Miskatonic deck that needs a whole lot more cards to be where I want it to be, but it's focusing on investigators.
Mm-hmm. So you're mixing two human factions.
Yes, as you can see, there's a Blackwood file clerk that just came down.
Right. She's pretty handy. I think of her as Mandy because she's in Arkham Horror.
Fair enough, fair enough.
Yep. And you give her a 45, as I recall.
Yes, I do give her a 45.
So she's a well-armed file clerk.
That's right, because file clerks need to have good armament.
Now, I'm playing a Cthulhu and Shub-Niggurath deck. Despite what may look like a yellow card there, that's a proxy Thunder in the East, which is one of Shub-Niggurath's staple support destruction cards. And I always forget, it lets you draw a card after you play it.
Ah.
This particular deck list is called Rebirth of the Cult. I found it on CardGameDB, and it was created by a user named Obtuse. If you want to check that out, it'll be in the show notes for this episode at helledaction.wordpress.com, where you can find sort of commentary and notes on all the decked episodes we create. I'm debating what to resource at this point, because this is literally the first time I have gotten to play this deck. It was something I found on CardGameDB. It sounded interesting. It utilized the new Sleeper Below cultists, who are frankly pretty baller.
Yes, they are, and they are pretty strong. This is also the first time I'm playing my deck. Coincidentally enough, I had, as I tend to do, goldfished a few times, but I hadn't actually sat down to play it, and it needs more cards.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going for a straight-up Shub-Niggurath domain over there. The deck is primarily Shub-Niggurath, in part because there's a very useful card in play called the Festival. And I've just played out the Conspiracy, the Guardian there, just out of view, unfortunately. And when the Guardian comes into play, it lets you search your deck for a night or day card and put it into your hand. And I am discovering now just what in this deck actually has the night or day keyword, and it is one card. Although it's an interesting point that I need to look up is if a Conspiracy is in play, does a card in your hand consider... I'm thinking particularly of Savio Corvi. Because his night keyword is conditional on, is there a conspiracy in play?
He would have to have the keyword night.
He does have the keyword night, but only when there's a conspiracy in play.
So I don't think it would then.
Yeah, because if he's in hand, that conditional text doesn't kick into gear.
Right.
Okay. So I realize that the only thing I can pull is a Plague Stone, and that'll go in my hand, and that'll frustrate. That'll be an interesting thing to deal with because I spent most of the game with Plague Stones in my hand. Multiple Plague Stones.
Plague Stone's bad.
Yes, they are.
Plague Stone's really good, don't get me wrong. It's just bad when you're sitting across from it and you have no answer for it.
Right. It's that whole having an answer thing. That whole sacrifice mechanic is something I'm not really used to, so I've been trying to embrace it more in exploring this game. Because when I started out playing card games, it was Magic, and it was like, Wrath of God, why would I want to kill all my creatures?
Yeah, it's definitely it takes a while and some seasoning playing card games to understand how beneficial it is to sacrifice your own stuff at times.
Mm-hmm. And now here's the Festival, which is the deck's restricted card. And over the course of this game, I will discover why the Festival is so restricted.
Yes.
Right now I can just sack a resource, and this was a pretty exciting draw for me because I had two festivals in hand from the jump. So you play one out, the other one, and use it to sacrifice the one I had resourced, so it hits the discard. And then I'm pointing out how it'll be able to bounce in and out. Or I was just expressing that I was happy that I could immediately use the Festival to put the Festival in the discard where it has another ability, which I immediately used to put Fiona Day on a domain because I had no Cthulhu resources which was rough because all the interesting cheap cultists require some Cthulhu in play.
Yes. And this is where I'm
Yeah, and
reading the festival because I couldn't remember exactly what it did at the time.
and you're fully processing all the details of how it works, and leaving me to discover the remainder over the course of this game.
Well, discovery's half the fun.
It is. I'm never going to forget. And just to be clear to anybody who's watching for this, I am not at all a card game expert of any kind. I just really enjoy Call of Cthulhu and Netrunner as well, but Cthulhu more. And I'm still learning and exploring the game. I partly through a lot of forum discourse on Card Game DB, also watching videos and seeing how people play when I can, and learning to recognize stuff. Now, so that was my exciting turn of playing out a card.
Yes. Meanwhile, I've got a file clerk with a 45.
Mm-hmm. She's armed for Squamous Bear.
And now I'm trying to figure out what to do with my cards.
Yeah. It's funny how much of our commentary is, no, we're trying to figure out what the hell we're doing.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of it. So I've completely diversified 2 different domains at this point.
Mm-hmm. You're on 2-2-1.
That is an...
Mad Genius.
Mad Genius, yes.
Yep.
We like it when Mad Geniuses go insane.
Yeah, because when he restores, he can put a token anywhere he wants. A success token. And there's the Atwood Science Hall.
Yes, which gives all of my characters with investigation icons an additional skill.
Mm-hmm. Which is
the Blackwood File Clerk is the only one benefiting from this at the moment, because the Mad Genius has no icons.
Right. Ideally, you want to be in a situation where you've got the characters that are bestowing investigation icons, and then Atwood is amplifying that effect.
Yes.
There's one card in particular, the Anthropology Advisor. You get a nice feedback loop of one gives investigation, the other gives skill, and they enhance each other.
Correct.
The File Clerk goes for... Tell me what that card is, Ray.
Oh, geez, it's hard to tell at this distance.
Looks like a gentleman leaning on a porch.
But
you're laying down.
I do believe that's the other path.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah, it's the other path.
Which each player can place a success token on a story if they have 2 or fewer success tokens on it when that's resolved.
And then, so that's the good turn for the File Clerk. Now I'm checking out what I have in hand. At this point, I think I'm pretty eager just to play a green card, which is why I went and used the festival to put a green card on a domain. But I'm also sort of figuring out how this deck is actually going to work. Because it's one of those, I mean, anyone who visits Card Game DB will see this deck has some useful notes on it, but often net decks are in that situation of, here's a list of cards, now figure it out.
Yeah.
And usually it's a puzzle. I'm not practiced at teasing out that puzzle yet.
I do believe you're getting much better at it, though.
Trying.
I'm going to start making up fake names and posting net decks and having you show up with them and going, I think this deck's supposed to do something.
Oh, I thought you were already doing that, because there are a lot of decks I do not get. And that is Savio Corvi.
Yes, it is.
He's a conspirator cultist, and see, I'm pointing this out, while there's a conspiracy in play, he gains text which makes it night and gives all my characters fast and a terror icon. And
which is really brutal.
Yeah, everybody getting a terror icon just for having a conspiracy out is handy.
Yes.
Now, Ray, did you ever consider going after the Guardian faster to get it away?
Honestly, I didn't. I was just thinking about it now. I was just thinking, geez, I should have gone after the conspiracy. And I didn't, but at the same time, I was also very on the defensive once the terror was out.
Yeah. Yeah, because you didn't have a lot of defense against it this game.
Right. And you just played a...
Baleful Reveler.
Thank you.
That is a cultist, and while it is night, they gain extra combat icons.
And that's from the Terror in Venice expansion.
Savio and the Reveler are both Terror in Venice characters, as is the Guardian. Terror in Venice has a lot of interesting conspiracy stuff going on, as well as the day-night mechanic.
Right.
And I've been flipping through more of those cards recently, and I want to do something with the Syndicate, because they...
And I throw the Mad Genius out there because you've gained a terror icon, and I want him to go insane.
Yep. Yeah, that's an easy one for you, because that... it's like you don't have to do anything, because no one else is going to go insane. It's an easy choice to restore. Yeah, because Terra and Venice Syndicate cards also have a lot of interesting when it is day, when it is night double effects. This is me showing off that I have all 3 of the Plague Stones in my hand, which makes my Mighty Hand not that impressive.
Right.
And then I'm realizing that the Mad Genius can place a token anywhere.
Yes.
Anywhere at all. Doesn't have no minimum number or maximum number of tokens need to be present.
And what I should have done was I should have put it on the conspiracy, and what you're going to see me do here in a second is put it on the middle one because I knew I could win the last story without too much trouble.
Mm-hmm. Now, why did you think about putting it somewhere where I didn't already have tokens?
Actually, no, I put it on that one because you already had tokens, and I really should have, again, gone for the conspiracy because I wasn't...
Well,
we have to set this up better so that I remember it's over there instead of on the other side of the
right.
story file.
It's in an awkward spot. I suppose we should just put it in the token pool area.
Right.
Because no one needs to see the tokens. We're still learning how to set all this up, folks. So thank you for bearing with us. Next time we'll do it differently. But I'm just happy that we can see all the cards and there isn't a lot of glare.
All right. I've resourced another agency card.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like that is Inspector Lee Flint.
Yes, it is.
Inspector Lee Flint is from the Jade Emperor, Curse of the Jade Emperor. Curse of the Jade Emperor Asylum Pack. And another investigator, obviously, and has the ability to, when he goes to a story, I can choose a subtype, and he gains a combat icon for each opposing character at that story with that subtype.
And the at that story is a really important part, because I spent a little bit of this game thinking it was all subtypes anywhere.
Right. You thought I could just choose cultist, and you had 9 bazillion cultist, and it was going to I was going to skyrocket on combat icons.
Does Lee Flint's ability only work on your opponent's creatures, or could you choose a subtype of your own?
Each opposing character, I do believe.
All right, so he has to be motivated to kill an enemy, not bolstered by allies.
Yes, and you can only do that once per phase.
That's an important restriction.
That is a very important restriction, otherwise that would get a little out of hand.
But it's attractive that it's at will. You don't need to pay for it.
Correct.
Now, I'm secure in the knowledge I cannot draw a Plague Stone.
Yes, this is true. And I am secure in the knowledge that if I send anything out to attack, I'm...
Yep. And now I'm remembering that it's important to keep re-triggering the festivals from discardability.
Yes.
Again, this is a learning process. And here's me realizing the festival's can keep bouncing back and forth as long as I have a festival in play to exhaust. Yep. Yeah, yes, Tyler. That's right. That's right, sweetie.
Wow, this is powerful.
I'm also concerned I might have played it wrong in that forgetting it needed to be on a drained domain.
You know, after because it's been a couple days since we played this. Now that we're recording it, and it's I was thinking about it, and I do believe we're going to see you misplay it a lot in this game.
I am really grateful this is not for official tournament status.
Well, yeah, I think the proxy kind of threw you out for that one, but...
Sacrifice. You exhaust a festival and sacrifice a resource to search your deck for a card and attach it to a drained domain. So whenever I'm searching my deck, it needs to go onto a drained domain. But when it comes out of the discard, it can go onto a fresh one.
Right.
Right?
I think.
Yes. Yes, it can. Now, suddenly I have a fistful of cards, which is a curious situation to be in for me. Usually I just play out my hand. That's something I'm learning in this game is hand management, because if you haven't got draw built into your deck, you need to be... I'm wondering if it pays better to be more conservative about when you play out cards.
Right.
Like, what is the psychological value of your opponent knowing you have 4 in hand as opposed to 1? Not as valuable as having played out those resources?
Yeah, I think not as valuable as having played out those resources.
So now we're getting more stuff on the field. 2 more cultists, the initiative Dagon, and Gustav. Gustav is a powerhouse. Just drawing cards whenever a cultist leaves play is amazing.
Yes, and as you can see, just to point out the effects of the festival, Tyler has 2 domains with 2, and one domain with 3, and he went second. I went first, and I'm already a resource behind.
Yeah, you're 3-2-1, and I'm 3-2-2.
Yes.
And so essentially, if you're calling to use the festival every turn, I think you can basically add an extra resource every turn.
Yes, that's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah.
However, the nice thing about it is you don't have to. You can just run the 1. You don't have to resource something extra from your hand every time.
Yeah, you can choose what you're going to resource
based
on pulling it out of your deck, which is great for multi-faction decks, of course, because you can find that critical match, or just something specific you want to resource because it's not the right time to play it, or you're set up to get it off a domain later.
Right, or it's not going to do you any good in this matchup.
Yeah. And here's throwing down tokens because everybody's got a terror thanks to Savio.
Yes, and me going, I don't want everybody going insane. And I couldn't commit my mad scientist this time, so.
Yep. The only, and I know this sounds like wishing for pennies from heaven. That's not a phrase. But the only thing that this deck would benefit more is some investigation.
Yes, but I think it's got enough of a control aspect that it doesn't need the speed of investigation. I've now gone 3-3-1.
So you want to be playing out multiple bigger characters.
Right. Well, and I'm using shotgun blast.
Shotgun to the face.
Yep. Boom.
And that's based on skill, not cost?
Correct. It is wound a character with skill X or lower.
All right. So how long have you been building up to that shotgun?
I could have played it the turn before, and I chose not to.
Okay.
And that is a freelance investigator, I do believe.
Yeah, freelance occultist?
Freelance occultist, that's the correct word. Who's just another investigator.
Got some icons. Skull and a magnifying glass?
Skull and a book, I do believe.
Book's nice, especially in agency.
And he's fast.
Yeah. Fast is... I've always... Until I actually started getting to play the game more, I wasn't realizing how valuable fast can be.
Fast can be very valuable. It's very hard to defend against fast. That's the trick. Or even to attack against it, because when it's sitting over there on the other side of the board, you're like, oh man, I've got 1 combat, but they've got 1 combat and fast. So...
And now you're deliberating over where to commit.
Yes.
Now, what do you, in a situation like this, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking, where can I win something? And I do believe you had 1 character that was...
Gustav is the only refreshed character at this point.
Right. And I was fairly certain you weren't going to just sacrifice Gustav for some crazy reason.
Right, because he's not getting any sort of buff.
Right.
He's got 1 skill, 1 skull.
And this is where I was asking about the stone, whether you
Right.
could trigger it anytime you wanted, or if it was only during your operations phase or something. So...
And I was sort of deliberating.
Again, completely forgetting about the conspiracy here.
Yep.
And I would have won a story here. I'm pretty sure you're going to set off that stone here in a second.
I think you're right. I think, again, this is me playing against my instincts as much as anything. I wanted to see what would happen if I took a more, let's burn it all down approach.
Right, and there it goes. Boom.
Yeah, the Plague Stone being a relic shuffles back into the deck.
Yes.
Which will frustrate me momentarily for reasons you will see. And that's an interesting recycling effect because you don't necessarily want to get it back, and you don't know when you're going to get it back.
Right.
And then now I'm finally removing my cards from play, and this is something I need to look into. I don't know if that timing is correct.
Right.
Because if characters leave play simultaneously, see, I got 3 Plague Stones again.
And there's the local sheriff.
Yes.
Because that was the only card I had in my hand.
The mighty local sheriff, Sheriff Engel from Arkham Horror. I need to look into whether, in triggering an action that removes multiple characters from play, does Gustav get to trigger off cultists that leave before he himself leaves? I know when he leaves, he cannot trigger himself.
Right.
Or key off himself, so I don't know.
Basically, do you get to choose the order, or are they all leaving at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, my gut is that because Cthulhu is a one thing goes and then another thing goes, is that they would leave in order.
Right.
But I am not I'm not a sufficient rules nerd to be certain of that. And here I've just used the festival to pull a Priestess of Bubastis out of my deck, simply because the Priestess is no longer really useful.
Right.
And I want to get another resource. I want to keep building up resources because reasons. There's a couple high-cost characters in here, that like the Ruinous Starspawn and Fiona Day, who are both 5-cost characters. Fiona is dormant, so she could get played out that way. Ruinous Starspawn, you can sacrifice cultists to ruin its you can sacrifice cultists to lower its cost to play.
To ruin its cost to play.
Just completely unplayable card. Don't know why it's in this deck. Have to take it up with Obtuse. And that was at the end of your turn, so now madness begins.
Yes.
I'm finally getting into the groove of bouncing the festival back and forth. I think that's so much of learning a card game and a deck is building the good habits the deck needs.
Correct.
That and it just comes with play and experience.
Right.
And here's a lucky pull on my part. I recall now that I pulled the something foul induction is what I pulled, which is from the new Sleeper Below box. It'll let you play out a number of cultists with a total cost of 3 or less from the discard into play. And that was just dumb luck on my part to get it after having dumped all the cultists into the discard. See, and this is realizing I need to drain the correct domains to play out Savio Corvi and get cultists back into play.
Yes. Meanwhile, as we already know, I'm sitting over there with a local sheriff, 2 drained domains, and a science hall.
Yep,
right. And there's me admitting defeat.
Ray is sad.
There's me going, you lucky son of... Except for the fact that I honestly figured you probably had that card in your hand when you triggered the stone.
Yeah, that would have been the ideal scenario, but again, I was going for that loosey-goosey, fuck it, let's see what happens.
Right. So it makes me feel a little better now that it was just dumb luck that you drew into the card and it wasn't a plan.
No, it wasn't skill. It was fate that doomed you.
Yes.
And now again, this goes back to that sort of the thing this deck needs is investigation.
Except it doesn't. I mean, you've got complete control of the board at this point in time.
But again, as you were saying in a previous recording, you wanted to win faster.
This is true. I did want to win faster.
And the Call of Cthulhu lets you search your deck for a card.
Yes.
And put it into your hand.
Put it into your hand. Yes.
Yep.
We each had the option of doing that.
And we had this little discussion about whether search effects require revealing the card or not. And you made the good point that in a situation like this, it shouldn't be. It is not necessarily required.
Right. Although I do believe that the Call of Cthulhu actually tells you to. No, it does not. Never mind.
Yeah. And I had been reading on a forum thread on Card Game DB about whether or not when search effects require revealing the card. And usually, I think you made the point, if it specifies a type or name, then yes.
Right, because you have to prove that that's the card you went and found. You didn't just get the card that you really needed in this situation.
Right.
It keeps honest.
And
you're just showing me random cards, apparently.
Yeah, I was just... Oh, no, I was showing you what I was sifting through my deck for, because we were having the do I need to reveal this or not conversation.
Gotcha.
And I was erring on the side of revelation. Showing off a couple of Dark Rebirths, which is a loyal Shub-Niggurath card of cost 3, and it has to be night to play, so that's a pretty steep conditional to play.
I was so defeated at this point in time that I couldn't find anything useful, so I just went for the card that was actually on the top of my deck at the time, which was the Strange Librarian.
This was a rough game.
This was a very rough game, but in all fairness, if you've watched previous episodes, you'll see that Tyler had the rough end of the stick in the first couple of games. So
I think it was a good lesson in sportsmanship, and I hope it was okay.
Yeah, no, and it was fine. It was I got my karma came back and got me, is what it comes down to.
The phrase you used that night was shellacked, and I feel like that was appropriate all around.
Yeah, yeah.
And then so we used Call of Cthulhu, and I pulled, I think it was a Fiona Day, or maybe a Ruinous Starspawn.
It was a Cthulhu card, whatever it was.
Yeah, it was absolutely green. We're so good at this,
aren't we?
I mean, well, if you ever watched the Fantasy Flight Games' live stream, their official commentators are about as positive of the cards they're looking at, because there's only so much you can do in this format.
Right, right. So I've gone to 4-3-1.
Because what's he going to play?
Well,
We know.
you know.
But
I have drawn 2 more cards. Let's not forget.
So that's going to leave 1 card unknown. Do you remember what it was?
I don't. No, I should leave 2 cards unknown because
Right.
I had the local sheriff.
Oh, I thought you were going to play out the librarian at some point.
Oh, I think I do play out the librarian this turn, but I should
Yep,
have
there you're like,
the sheriff, the librarian, and 2 cards in my hand.
you're like, there's the mother-pucking sheriff.
That's right. Fear the sheriff.
He's a great early card because he's got that double resource on him.
Yes, he does. Oh, that's right. I played a. Boy, you think I could remember the name of that
Unearthing
card?
the Ancients, perhaps.
Yes, Unearthing the Ancients, I do believe. So I could draw 3 cards because I wanted more cards in my hand.
Right. Again, having more options.
Having more options, exactly.
And it's I like that all the factions in Cthulhu are sort of getting up to speed and gaining options. I mean, some are always going to be a little bit behind. Miskatonic is always going to rule that part of strategy.
Right.
But Sleeper Below the Cthulhu faction gaining draw through cultist sacrifice, I think, is thematic and really helpful.
Very much so, yes.
But not, I hope, game-breakingly so, because
I don't feel it's been game-breaking yet. I mean, it looks it in this game, but...
Right, but I mean, the sleeper box has only just really gotten out, so it hasn't had the turn through the tournament circuit.
Right.
So we're going to, I think in the coming months, we're going to see what it's doing in Store Champions. And
I do believe that is a new recruit.
Yes, it's the super new recruit.
The super new recruit who is acting completely as a filler card in this deck at the moment.
I mean, he's got an interesting effect.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have to worry about him. You know, I can just keep shuffling him in, but he's a little bit of combat icon, but he's really not helping out the deck and what the deck was striving for.
Right.
Which was a heavy investigation with investigator as a key keyword.
Yeah, he's in government, right? Not investigation.
Correct. He's government.
Yeah, yeah. And he's. I don't know about his abilities. I feel like, do you want to put him back in your deck?
Yeah,
as the game progresses, he gets progressively less useful.
Right, he does get progressively less useful, unless you're using him as a sacrifice outlet. And since he's not a cultist, there's really not a huge sacrifice outlet out there for him. But it might be something somebody else might want to take a look into, combining agency with one of the Ancient One factions and seeing if maybe there's something about sacrificing that can be done with a new recruit and the ability to constantly shuffle him back into the deck.
Right. I mean, I could maybe like a serpent deck that's using Disguised Threat, which lets you turn a non-serpent into a serpent, essentially.
Right, that might work, something along those lines.
But then you want to be able to start getting the Disguised Threats back in your hand. And now I've just played out the 3 bells. That's a Shub-Niggurath support card where you can pay 1 and exhaust the 3 bells for each player to sacrifice a character. Then a token goes on the 3 bells, and if there are ever 3 or more tokens, there's another action the owner can trigger where you sacrifice the 3 bells and take a character from any discard pile and put it into play under your control.
Yes, it's something important to note about this because it has come up in games. Is that each player must be able to sacrifice a character to trigger it.
Right. Yeah, and I'm reminding myself that who needs to be sacrificing a character? I erroneously thought at first it was just me. I was like, oh, that's very onerous. But you correctly pointed out that no, it's both.
Yeah, it's both. I had just been looking at that card for a possible deck that I was building.
And that's the whole targeting thing is going. That's an ongoing conversation because.
And there goes the new recruit.
There goes the new recruit. Where is he? Oh, he's going back in the deck.
Going back in the deck.
Now, why did you put him back in the deck?
I have no idea.
Right on.
I wanted to use his ability.
That is part of the fun of this game. Is like I didn't actually accomplish anything, but I triggered a lot of fun abilities along the way.
I triggered an ability. Maybe I could draw him again and keep sacrificing him to the bell. That was probably honestly what I was thinking, was that if I could keep drawing new recruits, then I always had something to sacrifice to the bells.
And this, sorry, just to point out, Carl Stanford has hit the table.
Oh, yeah.
He's an invulnerable Cthulhu sorcerer who eats cultists to gain skulls and arcane icons, which he did not just do. Somebody hit the discard, but I'm not certain why. Oh, no, sorry, they committed to the Guardian. It must have been a Baleful Reveler.
Yeah, and that invulnerable really it caused some issues because I have a lot of combat in the deck, with all of the agency, and suddenly that combat was doing me no good.
Right. And sometimes I find invulnerability is more of a liability, in that suddenly this person is not a chump option.
Correct.
Or not suddenly, but always. But you know what I mean.
Right.
It's like you can't sack them when you might like to, or give them up, not sacrifice per se. So then the Baleful Reveler started going after the Guardian, and then we play out a new story in the middle there.
You can tell the worst hand body language ever on my part. I have completely given up.
But you stuck to it, and I appreciated that.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, not a quitter.
No.
Who knows what I could have played? Another local sheriff, except I only have one.
So many new recruits.
That's right, so many new recruits. I could have just kept playing new recruits. Mm-hmm. Coincidentally enough, we were just talking about reason to keep sacrificing, and the bells, if you were using it as a control mechanism to keep characters off your opponent's side of the board, being able to shuffle the new recruit back in would definitely be helpful.
Yeah, because I think that's the way I wound up using the bells. There was nothing I really needed to grab. It was really a control mechanism.
Yeah, that looks like Special Agent Callahan that just came out.
Yep. Which is he's a loyal 2 cost, and I think that's a fair way to price a loyal card.
Yeah, loyal 2 cost. He's heroic and he's got toughness, and he can gain some stuff. Again, he's government, so he's not going to make the final cut of this deck because he's not an investigator.
Right. Unless you get some really sweet government cards in for the greater good.
Right. Well, and if we get some really sweet government cards in for the greater good, then there'll be a new deck built. It won't be this deck. And there's a Strange Librarian. I'm looking through the top 3 cards of your deck.
Yep, and you can put them on top or bottom, however you like.
I get to put 1 on the bottom, and the other 2 go back on top in any order I choose. And what I actually choose to put on the bottom here, which is really silly of me because it really didn't matter how I was rearranging things because you're using the festivals. I actually put a festival on the bottom.
Right.
So that you didn't have the final festival.
Trying to take it away.
But it didn't make any difference because you were about to pick up the deck and look through it.
Yeah, pick up the deck and look through it. And am I using it correctly here? Is that a drained domain? I think it is, because it's the end of your turn.
Yeah, it's the end of my turn. It might be a drained domain.
And this is where I finally twigged to the another use for the festival. Get all the festivals out.
Yes, you were like, oh, grab the festival with the first festival.
I've been so used to people just talking about it as the makes multicolor decks functional element. I hadn't considered thin the deck.
Yeah.
So that's another hard-won realization on my part I probably will not forget anytime soon. And now, so that if that was the end of your turn, we'll be refreshing shortly. I like how we're trying to predict the turns instead of just commenting as it happens.
Yes. So on the next turn...
Yeah, and then beyond that... I mean, part of it is part of the reason we're recording this commentary is while we were playing, we did weed off into like personal conversation.
Right.
And that's fun and all, but I don't think I don't need to publish that for anybody in the world.
Yeah.
And now I'm building up to 5 on that domain, so it's a pretty easy guess that a big guy is now in hand, or a big person.
I think you were just doing that to intimidate me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you actually had anything you were going to play. You were just intimidating me.
I'll try to be a better sport than that.
You were like, all right.
Yeah, your hands are just off the table. You're leaning back.
Yeah, it's like I have the worst like body language right now. I'm like, yeah, I gave up. Would you just win the game already? Jeez. And you're down. I think you're up 2 stories at this point in time.
Yeah. I remember the Guardian was the final story. And
yeah, that's right, because you've...
Yeah. And it has a nice 1 ability or when in the 1 pile ability that I should have been considering. Or I will be considering in the future now that I've learned it exists. Right.
And when I'm playing against it, I will be considering the fact that I need to get Conspiracy out of play because... Yeah.
And the funny thing is, this deck has it's a semi-suite of characters designed to get the conspiracies out. So it's, they never turned up.
Is the only conspiracy in the deck that one? Like 3 copies of that one?
Yep.
I thought I saw from this angle in your hand earlier that you had 1 in your hand. I could be wrong about that.
I might have pulled another Guardian, but I'm pretty sure that is the only conspiracy.
That's what I meant, that you had another Guardian in your hand.
Right.
I thought I saw 1 earlier. Although just looking at your hand now, I couldn't see it. And
Or it might have just been a neutral character, because I think I pulled Old Lazy Eyes at one point and never played him out. Old Lazy Eyes lets you search for conspiracies.
right.
He's one of those early conspirator cards when they were just
I'm
sort of
adamantly talking about something.
I think this is where we weed off into
It
something.
must be, yeah. I tend to talk with my hands when I get very adamant, and as you can see from shadows and various things, I was, boom, hands everywhere. I will say this, from watching this video, I can come to one major conclusion. Neither you or I will ever be a hand model.
Why? Because we both have the red knuckles.
Yeah, we have like the red knuckles, and we don't have very elegant looking hands.
We're no George Costanza, who's never done Odeya work in his life.
That's right. Neither one of us is a George Costanza.
Now, do you ever consider your body language when you're playing?
Generally not. The only time I consider body language when I'm playing any game is if I'm sitting down and playing poker.
Not even a Battlestar?
No.
Just wondering. I never forget about it, but I absolutely, after the fact, become aware of when, I was like, oh, I'm defeated now. My shoulders are hunching.
Right.
And here out comes Fiona Day. She's one of the Cthulhu's new beefy cultists. When she enters play, when you play her from hand
yes.
correctly, paying the cost, she has a disrupt ability that you can sacrifice X cultists and play X success tokens on stories or story.
Yes.
And I made that stipulation about how she is played because the first time I did it, she got put into play via a card effect, which does not allow her ability to trigger. And that's an important distinction that is becoming more and more relevant as the card pool grows and there are more cards that make that important distinction. And again, this is a timing question whereby when multiple characters are sacrificed at once, does Gustav's ability trigger?
Right.
Because it's not an action ability; it's a forced response, which is a game effect, and according to the FAQ, happens as soon as the thing that causes it happens.
And although we didn't go through the motions there, that was him sacrificing the 3 cultists to win the conspiracy and finish off the game.
Right, and so that wrapped up the game. Ray, any closing thoughts on this match?
Yeah, I got my butt handed to me.
It's fair.
But I had fun. That's the most important thing. Win or lose, if you walk away from the table having had a good time, that's the most important thing.
And we were both 2 for 2 for that night, so I think it was good.
Yeah, it was good.
All right, so that was a Shub-Niggurath and Cthulhu versus the Agency and Miskatonic University match for Call of Cthulhu, the card game. Thanks everybody for watching. You should check out youtube.com/deckedshow for more episodes featuring Call of Cthulhu, Android Netrunner, and some new interesting stuff coming up soon. And we'll catch you sometime soon.